Hello, shalom. Introduce myself. Well, I am a rabbi. I am a cantor. I am a Jewish artist. I am a writer, and I have articles in the Jewish Journal of Los Angeles. I don't know if OC it receives the Jewish Journal, but I frequently have articles in there. I am married now 51 years to my beshert. I have 3 children who are very grown up and one grandson who is going to be 18. I teach at the Academy for Jewish Religion. It is a school where I was ordained twice as a cantor and then as rabbi. And part of my journey of grief is what brought me back there. But I'll talk about that in a moment. Let's see, what else can I say? I'm a Reiki practitioner. I have a congregation, and a dear friend and congregant is with us tonight, Tavora. We started an alternative synagogue in '93, and so it's now 30 years. Is that it? Yeah, I guess 30, 40. I mean, I can't even keep track of the time anymore. It has shifted and changed as a result of the life challenges that my husband and I have had. He is now a rabbi for well over 50 years. And we had a partnership of which he was the words, I was the music, I was cantoring. And all of that changed when he became ill. And I will talk about that as well. So I think that's enough, enough about me. I have written, so I make sure I cover the ground, so please be patient. I wasn't sure I would remember everything I want to tell you and what I want to share with you. And there'll be some images, information, and other things as well. So can everybody just mute themselves, or maybe Fran, you can make sure everybody's muted. So here we are. First of all, I do want to thank Marcia and Fran for inviting me and welcoming me to this collaborative. And this is a wonderful service that they do, obviously, for those of you who are in need. And I haven't talked to Marcia in a long time, so I'm not sure everything that the collaborative does, but it's wonderful to be young enough to be driven and motivated to create all kinds of new things. So let me hit this admit. So let me begin with, I'm actually speaking today out of the full force of my experience, because I tried to reach Marcia unsuccessfully, and my husband had an episode because he has moments of altered states. They're called the psychomotor seizures. And he had one at 3 in.the morning, which lasted until about 2 o'clock. And I wasn't quite sure I could even be here. But I'm speaking to you in the middle of, in Yiddish, we'd say mittendrin, of the experience of caregiving and all that means. So I'm going to be speaking from that experience, but I'm going to talk about grief as it overlaps and how I view it. Let's see, where did I start? So, speaking quite literally from my experience regarding loss and grief, which became a reality in my life about 20 years ago, when my husband had a shingles episode. And this led to ongoing medical emergencies and changes in both of our lives, created chronic pain and physical conditions for him, and consistent demands, responsibilities, and changes for me. Within a few years of losing my father, actually, my father had died about 6 months before the night that I became a cantor. My father passed away, and it was 6 months later that Steve had the shingles episode, and I was still navigating the grief from losing him. But it was clear that I was experiencing another kind of grief of a certain kind that I came to understand after much research and sharing with others. And what I want to first say is I believe there are 4 types of grief. The first, of course, is when you lose somebody that you love. The second is what they call ambiguous grief, and that means it's unresolved, without any closure whatsoever. And the term evolved for spouses whose partners were in the army. So if they were lost in action, sometimes they were presumed dead, but their bodies were never found. And if somebody's kidnapped, it's the same reality. You don't know where they are, you don't know what's happened, but you may never see the body. So in some way, there's no resolution to a death. And the kind of grief that the first one really allows you, because you see the body, you bury the body, and you begin to get some closure. The third kind of grief is what I call the little deaths that we all experience in life, particularly as we age and we move through daily changes and losses. And all of this is inevitable for all of us. And then there's a fourth grief that I experienced. Some of us inherit it genetically, and some of us are exposed to it as a child of Holocaust survivors. So I watched my mother grieve most of the time when I was growing up, for she had lost every single member of her family. In fact, I've written a memoir, which I hope to publish very soon, and I speak about being a memorial candle because I was named after my grandmother, Eva, who died in the Holocaust. My life and my being was often like being a Yisker candle. And my mother lived with me and she looked at me, and I'm sure I was a reminder just by virtue of my name. So I must add that this last kind of grief, of which I was attuned to, created for me a great deal of comfort and compassion for people who are grieving. And it is a hallmark of my rabbinate and cantorate. In fact, I often share with people that my favorite piece of work is officiating at a funeral and supporting people who have lost someone. So it has turned out to be a blessing. And that's one of the things I want to talk about as far as grief is concerned, and what are the gifts that we receive as a result of grieving. So now back to the different kinds of grief. I understand that many of you share the griever's journey because you have lost somebody you have loved. Some of you may have been caregivers before you lost a family member, so you may relate to my experience. And there may be some of you here who are living with somebody right now that you are taking care of. But I do want to speak about some of what I've learned as a result of that particular journey, and focus on grief as a key element of the result of the caregiving daily, which is now almost 20 years. And when you live with somebody who's chronically ill, you are sharing their illness. That's just a reality. And you know, if you do some research, you will discover that 75% of marriages end in divorce when one person's chronically ill. The demands are beyond imagination when you live with them 24/7. I have experienced the grief that some of you have had. I've lost my mother, my father, my grandmother, my in-laws, and most recently my brother-in-law, who died a couple of months ago. So I'm familiar with the impact of losing somebody that I've loved. And I will share that the days, weeks, and months after were like riding the hills and then going into the deep valleys. It's consistent waves, Some are deeper and more impactful. And there are moments of elevation and tapping into some hope that life will one day resume with more normalcy and predictability. And eventually it does. I will say for people who have lost children, that's a much harder reality. I've had a number of congregants in the past who've lost children. You never, ever get over that loss. So that's a very painful one. So let's see, where do I want to go from here? Let me focus for a moment on what I called ambiguous grief. It's what I'm most familiar with now, and I've been navigating this for, as I say, almost 20 years. It is living with ongoing losses and changes that I have to metabolize while continuing to do the caregiving, physically and emotionally, as well as support my husband, who has his own realities of losses and changes and grief. He was the president of AJRCA when he got sick, and he was teaching classes. We were both teaching at the AJU, which had a different name at the time. Yeah, the University of Judaism.
And AJR is the Academy of Jewish Religion, and they have a campus here and in New York.
Well,
Yes,
New
I
York,
just wanted to.
yeah, sorry, you may not know
Oh,
what
it's
the
all right.
JRCA is. Yes, so the Academy for Jewish Religion is a non-denominational, or as my husband calls it, because he's one of the founders, a trans-denominational seminary. So instead of focusing just on one denomination, it sort of crosses all of them. So let me speak a little bit about some of the symptoms that are similar for people who experience different kinds of grief, but the impact, right, on the body, on the soul, on the mind. There's anxiety and excessive worry, sometimes anger, extreme exhaustion and sleep deprivation, health problems like heartburn, headaches, colds, changes in appetite, loneliness and social withdrawal, enormous melancholy and fits of crying, sadness, sometimes hopelessness and feeling helpless, lack of interest or pleasure in things that you once enjoyed, memory and concentration issues, fogginess, inability to make decisions. And in fact, if you are grieving, you're told not to make any major decisions. Feeling like half a person, losing that sense of wholeness, especially if you lose a partner and you've been married a very long time. As my husband and I, when that person is gone, you feel like you're half there. Half of you is gone. Sometimes there are thoughts of suicide or death for people who are seriously depressed, irritability and impatience. And particularly as a caregiver, there is something called hypervigilance, which is what I find myself living with. And if you've had a child, you know, in those first few months, when you have a newborn infant, you're hypervigilant. You're always anticipating their cries, their needs. When you become a caregiver and you have someone who's chronically ill, and there are different kinds of episodes that go on, you become very hypervigilant, anticipating, you know, when is the shoe going to drop all over again? And in this year in particular, my husband was in and out of the hospital 8 or 9 times. I mean, I've lost track, truly. It was the year from hell. But into the hospital, many surgeries, a lot of infections, back to rehab, back home. And as I said in the beginning, it's complicated because he does have this one condition in the brain these psychomotor seizures, which one never knows when they're going to happen. And when they do, he's no longer himself. It's like taking care of a 175-pound infant, which is not an easy task. And there are moments like today, which were not as severe, and I wasn't quite sure if I could do this or if I could find someone to just be with him so I could be with you. But those are the challenges of caregivers who don't have professional caregivers. And 20% of the population is unpaid caregivers. It's just profound. There is something called compassionate fatigue. And if any of you lived with a spouse or a parent who is ill for a long time, and this for me feels very real as a caregiver, you do go through compassionate fatigue because caring for somebody is demanding physically, it's demanding emotionally, and it's demanding spiritually. And there is a point at times where you become numb, where it's almost a self-protection, because it's, if it's ongoing and chronic, the impact can be really almost unimaginable. So the impact of stress and loss affects thousands of caregivers. And the research shows that often caregivers become ill and die before the person they're caring for. That's what the research shows. It's not a particularly comforting thing to know. But as a caregiver and with my experience, knowledge, wisdom, I know that I have to take very good care of myself because he depends on me and I depend on me. So it becomes quite a responsibility when this is what you do, as your work and out of love and out of living together. So that's a little bit of an overview. I want to show you or share with you a couple of things. So let's share this first. So in the journey that I've taken over these 20 years, as I said, I was a cantor and my husband was the rabbi. One of the things that became very clear to me within a couple of years is that if our synagogue was to continue, I either had to hire a rabbi or become one. And for those people who know me, they know I would choose become one. And it really was as a result of his illness and some of the sadness and facing the loss that I realized I needed something else to both preoccupy myself with, to lift myself up, because what we want to be able to do is find a higher purpose in our loss and our grief. That's ultimately what we all hope for. So I wrote the 10 Commandments for caregivers. I don't remember what year, actually. I didn't put the year on it, but it was a way for me to understand and help others to be able to navigate and take care of themselves. So number one is to surrender to living in a new normal, which is anything but normal. But you have to give up expectations when you walk into this kind of life. I have to surrender to the unknown, the unpredictable, and be in the now. That was really clear. It was a big change to live with what I call hypervigilance, but the unpredictable nature of the medical problems and all the different things that were to come, which I had no idea. I couldn't anticipate the domino effect, of one illness leading to other things, medications leading to side effects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I must relinquish all expectations as nothing will ever be the same. And that became very clear to me after a number of years. And I should add that my husband has had other illnesses in the past, but he always got over them. He bounced back and we just went forward. This was not the same. I must honor my feelings of loss, of sadness, of fear, anger, and guilt. And I had the whole gamut, as many of us do when we are caregivers or even after we lose somebody. There is a gamut of emotions that we face even as we review the past and think about the relationship. I must have compassion for the one I care for. That certainly was absolutely a necessity. And for their new road of difficulty, for their pain, their trauma, their dependency, and their loss. Because when people get ill, life changes dramatically. When they are chronically ill, things just are not the same. I must have compassion for myself as I navigate new demands and responsibilities. I did, because I had to learn a lot. I had to research a lot, met a lot of new doctors, got a lot of new information. I had to create my own lists of medications and doctors that I could share if I took them to the ER, to the hospital. I must recognize the impact that this new role can have. The new role of caregiving, it's exhausting, it's stressful. There is a lot of fogginess in the brain, anxiety, PTSD, and grief. So, we don't have maybe all of it, but some of those kinds of emotional responses are very normal and predictable for people who are caregivers. I must take care of not only my loved one, but also myself. That became very clear that I really did need to take care of myself, whether it was physically, spiritually, emotionally, whether it was through diet or exercise, spiritual practice. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, because I needed to sustain my strength and my resilience. I must find appreciation and gratitude for moments of joy and pleasure, no matter how small. I began to appreciate the tiniest little moments, often here in the yard, near my fountain, with people, with the work that I came to do was just my solace. When I was helping other people and I was doing a good job, I really felt rewarded and nurtured. And I must discover my new bliss. So becoming a rabbi and going back to school was my new bliss, and create a life of meaning, productivity, and life-fulfilling activities. And I needed to do that. I will say that all of this happened when I was about 58, 57. So I was 20 years younger. I had, I would say, more energy and vitality and a great deal of motivation and desire to expand, to work, to do all kinds of things. 20 years later, I'm not quite the same, but there's still a sense of youthfulness that I hold on to, and I have to work, doubly hard to make sure I stay healthy and strong. That's what we all do, or should do. So I wanted to share this with those of you who are grieving, because I'm sure you can relate. And this is a statement from Psalm number 6. And this statement itself, I know you can all relate to. I have related to it many times in my moments of caregiving, the amount of tears, the amount of crying, floating in them. I wanted to share this with you, but I have a very particular teaching of my own around tears. I call it my inner mikveh. If you know what a mikveh is, it's a spiritual bath. It's a place where people go for renewal and change and transformation. And I feel that the tears that we have, like the mikvah, is very purifying and healing. And I wanted to share this psalm with you because it's one of the best psalms for people who are grieving, who are sad, who have pain and suffering. Because, there's a difference between pain and suffering. We used to joke, my husband and I, he would have pain and I would suffer. So, but he's had his moment of suffering, and I've had my occasional moments of pain, which is really more about aging. The back, the knee, the things that just seem to happen as we get older. This is Psalm number 6. Hashem, do not rebuke me in your anger, nor chastise me in your wrath. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. Hashem, heal me, for my bones, they shudder with distress. My soul is utterly terrified. But thou, O Lord, how long? Return, O Lord, deliver my soul and save me as befits your kindness. For in death, there's no remembrance of you. In the grave, who is going to thank you? I am weary with my groaning. All the night I drench my bed. I water my couch with my tears. My eyes are consumed because of grief, aged because of this torment. Depart from me, all the works of iniquity, for the Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping. The Lord hath heard my supplication, and the Lord will receive my prayer. Let all mine enemies be ashamed and utterly confounded. They will be ashamed and regret in an instant. And sometimes our enemies are just things that are internal to us. They are the things that stand in our way and get in our way of moving forward. So I wanted to share this with you. I think it's at a time when one is grieving, it's wonderful to have words to express if you don't have your own. Though being able to express your own is certainly something that is very important. So navigating and finding healing for grief, let's look a little bit at some of the things I want to share. As I said, surrendering to the reality is so important. It's being able to express, to release all the emotions that are inside. It is a surrendering process. And for Judaism, it is a year-long process. The ritual is a week in which all you do is grieve. You sit in Shiva and people take care of you. You don't have to do anything for yourself. And then you move into the month of minimal emotional and physical movement, but you do try to re-enter the world through some work or necessary actions, but not to celebrate or be in joy. And then the rest of the year is a slow process, slow movement of acceptance, eventually change, and being in a newer place. And it is at that moment when the unveiling of the headstone is done. And usually a year later, you're in a different place than you were the year before. That doesn't necessarily mean your grief is over. It still does creep in. No, it is circuitous. It's hills, it's valleys, it's unexpected emotions that just blindside you when you least expect it. Finding a support group, which is obviously what you have all done, is very important. Begin researching and Googling information about the symptoms you're going through and other people's stories about grief. Begin to discover what I talked about before, the gift of grief, the new possibilities and the undiscovered ways to find meaning, purpose, and possible change that will nurture you and nourish you in the future. By creating art, listening to music, writing, expressing what is in your heart and your soul, which is often hard to speak about. In fact, I want to show you my art, because it became, for me, a way to heal my parents' pain. So when this is done, I will go there. Use the poetry and the prayers of our tradition, the Psalms, the prayers that can accompany you and walk with you. The Gevurot is a particular prayer that we do 3 times a day. It's in the service. The reason I mention it is because it talks about God's power to heal, and it often refers to something about being, the soul coming back. And it uses the word mechaye hametim, which means giving life to the dead. The thing about the word metim, it can be a noun or a verb. So both my husband and I teach it as a verb. So it's not about dead, it's about dying. And all of us are always going through little deaths and dying of one sort or another. So we can explore that some more later. And then I gave you Psalm number 6, which I'm happy to send. You can find it online. Acknowledging the negative and the unpleasant emotions that may arise. You can't push them down. You can't hide them. They're real. Acknowledging them is really important. It is normal. It is part of the process. And accepting that is a very important part of grieving. Having compassion and patience for yourself is very important. The process of grief when you lose somebody takes time and takes a lot of patience to be aware of that, which is why, our Jewish rituals help to support our awareness of the time that it takes. Begin to approach moments of self-care and nurturance. Perhaps it's in the garden, making puzzles, a creative activity, a spiritual practice through prayer or meditation, or exercise such as walking or yoga. Just being in nature, finding the ability to be alone, not necessarily lonely, but alone. If you lose a partner, you have a lot of alone time, and finding meaning and purpose in that is really important. So I want to show you something before I go on to a prayer that I've written. I want to share a number of those. So let me now go to a different screen. So what you're seeing is something I created many, many years ago. I believe it was in the 80s. I became a ceremonial Jewish artist after I gave birth to my first child. I tapped into a kind of creative need and the divine spirit. And within a couple of months, I was taking classes in applique, in quilting, and I started creating quilts. And then when I moved to LA with my husband, he got a job at Temple Emmanuel. He was the rabbi there for 16 years. I had this thunderbolt. I wanted to create a fabric mezuzah. And I call this my post-Holocaust mezuzah. All these scraps of fabric represented parts of the Jewish community that had survived, all tied together, the stitches of healing with my shin. And so this came as a result of the grief that I was exposed to as a child of Holocaust survivors. And this is 2 of them together with the scroll, the Shema V'Ahavta, which is a wall hanging. And I ended up making Torah covers, Torah mantles, and chuppahs, a number of other things. but I wanted to share with you how grief moved me to a place of expressing a voice that I didn't even realize I had. So now I want to go back and share a prayer that I wrote for people who grieve. I've written many prayers. I'm going to share a number of them with you. But this is a prayer for one who grieves. Ribono shel olam, master of all, unifier of many, the darkness envelops me and at times obscures my sense of reality. My vision is clouded from losing, and then of course you'd put the name in of the person you've lost from my life. From living now without him or her, and what is unfamiliar and new and unknown. My hearing is muffled from the sounds that remind me of him or her. My heart aches for another moment for the one I have loved, who has been taken from me. My soul has shriveled as my world feels diminished. I am but half the person I was. I search for the spark of your light, for I know you're there, but I feel so alone. Though I walk through the valley, deep and dark, I pray to you to help sustain and nourish my strength and resilience so I can find meaning in this loss. To be able to walk with grace, compassion, and kindness while accepting my sorrow and my grief. Help me maintain a sense of balance when it often shrivels up, leaving me bent over of body and soul. Guide me to find purpose and meaning in my grief, to know that in crossing this rough and narrow sea, some gifts of wisdom and understanding will one day emerge. Be my mikveh, my divine waters, that I can enter to cleanse and purify myself, even though my tears and the unpredictable journey I now navigate. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, Holy Spirit, healer of the sick, Shekhinah to the isolated. Walk with me, accompany me, and hold me. In these unrelenting days of chaos and change. I'm going to stop there. Give myself a moment. I also have a mishaberach that I often share for caregivers because they're not usually thought about. There are plenty of mishaberachs for those who are ill.
Before you go there, take a breath, because
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that. And I think what's true about folks who are grieving is that you can be walking along, doing your thing, and then all of a sudden, you're in grief land. And I think what Rabbi Cantor Robbins was talking about before is to honor that when that moment occurs, as opposed to, oh my God, I've been grieving for so long. How did this show up? You know, that you give yourself that moment and even perhaps turn to someone and say, you know what, give me that moment. So I honor your vulnerability and wanted to just give you a moment to catch your breath.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It does come sometimes unannounced, unprepared, and it was very interesting when I was studying that I was told by one of my teachers, because my emotionality is something I come by naturally. My mother was, along with the grief, cried very easily, and I seem to, through osmosis, have picked that up. But as a professional, it was an interesting issue. And I was told specifically by one of my teachers, when you do a funeral or any life cycle event, you can't let yourself become emotional, and you can't cry, Eva. It's not okay. And I have found in my experience, since I've been doing this since 93, basically, that is the one thing that people really relate to. It gives them permission. I've had to stop and take a breath officiating at a funeral if I've known the person, and even if I have felt an affinity with someone I didn't even know because of all that I learned about them. And most people are moved and actually quite grateful. So I just want to share that in the world out there, it is often seen as weakness to cry, to become emotional, but it's real. And being real and in the moment is one of the things that we need to do when we are in grief, as grievers, as people who go through loss and the pain of that it's okay to be real. So perhaps, let's see, what time is it? Perhaps we could have some questions, and then I can share something else, but maybe this is a good time. I just want to go back to gallery and see if there are any comments, questions, responses.
I'm going to try to go back to gallery too, so that I can be an appropriate host. And there we go. Great. And so Michelle, give me just a quick second here. I got you. What I want to say is I see that there are 17 participants, which so grateful that you're here. What I'm not seeing are more than 12 of you. So, perhaps Rabbi Tilchin, who has joined us, can help me find the other 5. But Michelle, you had your hand up, and so I would love to recognize you there with a question.
Oh, hi. Yeah, thank you. First of all, Rabbi Cantor Eva, this was fantastic. So yasher koach, and thank you. Really sharing your own story and from the heart. I'm just wondering, it sounds like you've been so alone. How did you not feel alone? And I know you gave us all the things, but still, how did you kind of refill your own well and your own strength? So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you. You mean during these years of caregiving and living with a chronically ill spouse?
Yeah. Oh, and I just want to add, I do read your articles in the Jewish Journal, so thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. I do feel alone at times.
Right.
I acknowledge that. It is a reality. There are times my husband is here, but not. Because of medications, because of conditions. Sometimes he sleeps a lot. We intend to do things together, but he kind of goes out, he's gone, or we've had to deal with emergencies, or even especially in those moments when he has the seizures, I feel at times abandoned. He's literally gone. The man, that I live with and love and share work and family is literally gone. He's not there. And the only thing that can come close to that reality is people who have someone in their lives who either has dementia or Alzheimer's. Now, he has neither of those, but I understand that sense of watching someone disappear on you and they're just not present. And in those 2 conditions, they generally don't get better. He does. He comes back, but always a little less than before. And I often just have to find the things that really nourish me. Sometimes it's just reading. Sometimes it's sitting by my fountain. Sometimes it's just meditating. I started doing Qigong. In fact, I did a lot of it this summer when my husband was in the hospital and rehab constantly. And it was very stressful. And I realized that my body was in dire need of something. And I discovered it to the point where I was actually able to teach a little bit during the high holidays to help other people. Like, it was part of the prayer service. I work very hard at finding things that do fill me. Sometimes it's just silence and quiet. I am grateful for whatever work comes my way, because then I have to prepare and I have to meet with people and I teach it. And all of a sudden, I'm not alone. So, in the journey of grief, we do eventually need to find ways to fill ourselves, whether it's in a class or discovering a new passion. I have an article, I believe it's coming out this weekend, about how to hold on to the light and what we need to find to keep us alive and alit, even during our grief and certainly later post. There is a time frame in which it becomes less, you're in the moment with it, and it becomes a little more part of your past. So I don't know if that helps.
And I see you there, Barbara, but what I want to say on top of that is how important it is that you said, I am alone sometimes. Because I think sometimes what happens to those of us who are both caregiving or grieving is it's no, keep that away, keep that away. And the ability both to say that out loud rather than hold it or tighten around it is the thing that allows people to connect with you. And so I really appreciate that you said that, because that's the piece. I think even when you said it, the space in the room just went, oh yeah, say it. So I just really want to honor that you put that out like that. And the next hand I see, yay, hands, this is good. So we have Barbara, and then I see Nancy. And if there's anybody in the other side, maybe Rabbi Tilchin, if you see them, that would be helpful too. So I have Barbara and then Nancy.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My son Charles passed away a little over 6 months ago. He was 25 years old. And I don't begrudge other people who are listening and the speaker if they want to strive to find meaning in death, or if they want to find a gift of grief or acceptance. But I don't feel that way. And honestly, I will never feel that way. And for me, frankly, the process that is sometimes spoken of grief seems very formulaic. And when it comes to my son, and I'm 69 years old, I've outlived him, by, 44 years. That's not normal. Well, I mean, there's a lot that's not normal. I don't know what's normal, but it's not natural. And I'll never stop being angry about it. And I will never find meaning in it. And it doesn't matter to me whether it's, again, I'm not trying to burst other people's bubbles, and, and respectfully, but for me, it doesn't mean that I sometimes do have joy in my life, notwithstanding, and I look at it as a bifurcated way of being, that there's a dark cloud that's all the time. One of the things you said that resonated with me, it's, feeling, it was with respect to your spouse, with respect to him, I feel like I'm half of me is gone. And Charles has a twin brother, so it complicates it. They weren't identical, but nevertheless. So I feel like I've always identified as a mom, their mom. So I feel like half of my heart, is gone.
Right.
And but I do find joy. I have a wonderful cat. I have a wonderful other son that doesn't take the place of Charles. I watch stupid television shows. And, so, I can enjoy a beautiful day in nature. So the whole world isn't like uniformly dark for me. And maybe it's just semantics, but it's difficult in terms of meaning, because there is no meaning. And only the last thing I will say in terms of searching, I am searching and want to search at different levels to actually find Charles, to actually be able to, in this realm, be able to communicate with him, because that's another part of me that I find so difficult to accept, that, I'm not going to be able to communicate with him.
Right. And sorry, Rabbi, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to.
Thank you, Barbara.
First of all, I'm so sorry. It's a painful reality. And I did say, when someone loses a child, having had a few congregants who had lost their children, and they tended to sit together and be together because they shared this humongous loss. There is, you never get over it. It's never going to go away. The pain will always be ever present. I appreciate and understand that. That's just real. And I understand you're wanting to be able to communicate with him. It's, he's not there, but maybe there are vehicles for that for you, even with the help of some spiritual guides, to be able to communicate, say the things you want to say, and find a way to reach out to him. So I feel for you. I'm sorry.
And what I really appreciate about what you said before, Rabbi, is that our grief is unique, and that to honor that as it comes, and to not worry that, oh, it might not look like this. So I really appreciate that you said how that the role is, or the hope is, that we can find our grief and honor it, and acknowledge that our grief is as unique as the people we love. So I really appreciate that you brought that out. And I'm going to call on.
Can I just say one more
Did
thing?
I? Yeah, go. I saw your face. Go, say.
Yeah. So, and Barbara, the anger is so legitimate. And being able to express it and being able to share it and release it, from my point of view, is really important. You're entitled.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nancy Sofer. Oh, unmute.
Okay. Rabbi Cantor, so much of what you've said resonated with me. So much. I'm 11 months in to losing my husband. And there are just 2 points I want to make, if that's okay. The first is, when you talked about the 4 different types of grief, I thought you were missing one, but it seems like you combined with what you called ambiguous grief. I first understood as no resolution. What I experienced a lot, because I was his caregiver, was anticipatory grief.
Oh.
And I think that's what you're experiencing. I mean, I'm no expert. All I know is my experience. But that was a really hard thing to deal with, because I knew he was dying, and I was grieving him before he was dead.
Let me respond to that, because I'm glad you raised it. Because I have a congregant and dear friend who was just told he has ALS. And they are in grief and anticipatory grief. With my husband has, for all that he has, nothing that he has is predicted to kill him. So we have this ongoing cycle of things that happen, they get better, and they happen and get better. There is no sense, unlike somebody, I don't know if your husband had cancer, but if you live with someone who has a kind of illness where you do anticipate it's going to happen, yes. I actually don't have anticipatory grief because of my reality, but it does exist. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
The other thing, and I please don't take this as I hope no one will think this is rude or anything, but there was a time near the end when I was taking care of my husband that, I mean, it was awful. He died of three things. He had two different types of cancer, but what he died of was a very rare neurological disorder. And little by little, he lost his ability to speak and then swallow and everything. And he had a catheter and everything. And when he pulled the thing out and there'd be pee everywhere, you know, I'd get mad at the disease, but then I'd say I'd give anything. I said at the point in time I'd give anything to have him back just so I could take care of that. And so I'm happy that you had those good moments because I miss those so much. I appreciated those while he was dying.
Yeah, that path that you shared with him is also a very highly elevated experience when you walk with someone who's dying.
Well, it was a real beautiful transition. It was amazing that sometime I'll share. But yeah, it's just that I'd give anything to even do any of those terrible things again.
You know, I hear you. I was having dinner with a friend recently whose husband had died. I don't a number of years ago, and she wanted to know how things were going. And as I shared them, she looked at me and she said, "You know, he's still here." I said, "Yes, yes, he is." And much of the tsuris, if you'll excuse my lingo, the tsuris is okay, and we live with it and we get through it, and but he's here. And I truly understand and what you're talking about. We would give anything to have him back, even just to do whatever was needed. I get it.
So thank you. This is helpful.
Rifki, I noticed that your hand is raised. Will you share with us?
Hi. Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for your your experience and your talk, Rabbi Robbins. I know I'm the youngest here, at least for the people from the people I can see on camera. My mother died 19 and a half years ago, and it changed my life. And I can relate to, like, I don't know what I've heard, like, and she was like you, like the child of Holocaust survivors and named after her two grandmothers. And she was emotional, I'm emotional. And yeah, now I'm finally at a place in my life where I'm studying music, something I've wanted to do for a long time. And I definitely like it doesn't leave me, like my story is like my mother's not here, and I had to relearn how to be in the world, and it's still very hard, but I guess it's nice to see like there is some distance now, because the grief was so raw, and like, I mean, it was devastating. And I mean, for so long, I just, yeah, it was dark. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's 19 years, but like it's still there. Um, yeah. So
Acceptance is accepting that we'll never be who we are, who we were. That's what acceptance is, that we will never be who we were.
yeah.
I'm going to take, please, Rabbi, respond to that, and then I'm going to give the floor to Rabbi Tilchin.
Yeah.
You're on, Rabbi.
Rifki, how old were you when it happened?
I was 20, turning 21. Yeah.
Such a hard time. just becoming an adult and all those amazing things to look forward to, and not to have her there to share it with you is a very, very painful reality. I will say to you, I think she is with you. I think
Agreed.
opening yourself up to the presence, perhaps, of her in your life, finding those moments that you shared together and keeping them alive. I often tell people at funerals, when you carry on the values, when you live out the values and the behaviors of these people who so impacted you, you keep their memory alive and you actually feel connected to them. When you begin to do the mitzvot, the good things, or the way, she expressed herself or was in the world with you.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do that, she will feel like she's with you all the time.
Absolutely.
That's why I moved out to LA, because she grew up here and I feel closer to her. And also studying music. I mean, it's my passion, but she was the one to instill that. So I feel like I'm honoring her, and there's always that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, you are. You're honoring something that I bet she hoped for you. But if you think back about some of the things of the way she was in the world and how she related to others and the things she did and gave or said, if you can, find those and then make them a part of you purposefully, consciously, she will be much more integrated into your life and reality.
Thank you.
Rabbi Cantor Robbins, I'm so glad that you have been in my life for so very many years, and just so grateful to have you here. And folks, I want you to know that I've also copied the pages that Rabbi Cantor Robbins showed us, and Rabbi Marcia Tilchin, who I'd like to bring this to, will help me figure out how to send them to you. So Rabbi Marcia Tilchin, Rabbi Cantor Marcia Tilchin, and again, Rabbi Cantor Robbins.
Thank you.
Tov. Thank you.
Eva, I want to say thank you to you for this really holy and for all of the message, just very inspiring and courageous presentation. I've known you also a long time, but didn't know your whole story, right? Because we sort of had more of a superficial collegial relationship, and you do not carry this with you into your professional work. And so this was a much deeper insight into the woman that you are, the leader that you are, the spiritual leader, and also the kind of friend you've been to many of our shared colleagues. And so first of all, thank you. What I would ask is, if you can, some of your poems were gorgeous. The 10 Commandments were helpful. If you send me, everything that you have, I will make sure that people people who registered for tonight, some did not make it, and those who are here get copies of that as attachments. So if that works for all of you, I think that'll be the most productive way to share Eva's materials. And I just wanted to say thank you for coming. This is as Chaplain Fran probably said at the introduction, this is our second Circle of Hope and Healing. We're looking to make this a monthly, almost like a seminar, just like the way Eva taught. So not so much a support group, which we have in the other weeks, but an opportunity for us to learn and, and share at the end, our feelings and impressions. And we are very pleased that we can offer this online Jewish bereavement grief program. And we are looking to expand it and grow it as the demand calls us to do. And the Jewish Collaborative, it's the Jewish Collaborative of Orange County. We just briefly, we started in Orange County in 2016, almost like a like a JCC without walls or a federation without walls, but focusing on spiritual and communal work in a different way than both those organizations do. And 8 years later, we're still chugging along and building new programs all the time. And so we are grateful to have you part of the collaborative family. And we hope that I hope that this was as meaningful to you as it certainly was to me. Let me just a preview of next month on January 25th. I think it's January 25th. Rabbi Ilan Glazer.
I think there's something going on with
You're
Marcia.
glitching. Yeah, you're glitching there, Rabbi.
Okay.
We got you back, I think. Make sure everybody is,
Lost
yeah, make sure you're muted, so that'll help her.
I won't talk much longer. I just wanted to say that Rabbi Ilan Glazer will be with us the last of next month. He's a very interesting, he's a college graduate, very guy, composer, and he recently produced an album in memory of a son that he and his wife very much wanted, and unfortunately they could not bring to term because of fetal abnormal. So they weren't, but they've been grieving that in a totally different way. But what he's going to be talking about is how he's channeled sort of his feelings and his journey into his music. So a little bit about what Eva did, and he'll be sharing some of that. He started a very interesting program called Our Jewish Recovery, which is an online it's an organization that brings together Jewish people who are working any kind of 12-step programs. There's a lot of different relates to his name. And so anyway, for being here, and we have Chaplain Randy with us. Randy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, hi. I hadn't registered, so I wanted to make sure I put my name and an email address just to make sure that you had me in your group.
Okay. How did you find out about this?
I'm not actually sure, but I got an email. So I signed up for something some time ago. And let's see, where's my email? Circle of Hope and Healing Tonight on Zoom.
Okay, so you are part of the group. That if you got that, then you are totally registered, and you are now whether you like it or not on our list forever. So
wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate this.
And so as we get ready to close, we'll leave the room open if anyone wants to still talk to Eva. I'm going to have to step away. Again, I want to say thank you to our outstanding professional clinician, Chaplain Fran Shalin, who runs all of our groups currently and has been an amazing teacher for me. And it's really wonderful, Eva, to have you sort of part of this family. A great privilege. I guess I'll just say that as we turn the calendar to 2024, you've ever heard the expression, it was a good year. Kind of hard to say that about 2023 for a lot of reasons. So I guess the best thing I can say is that when we meet, when we are together again 365 days from now, we might be able to say 2024, it was a good year overall. It's not good. That's about as steep as I'm going to take that blessing.
I guess the one thing we need to leave with is that we need to remember those, whatever they were, the small ones that were productive, meaningful, hopeful, nurturing. This year was not a good year in so many ways for so many people, but we could all find something that we can remember and hold on to.
Yes.